The more traditional idea of armed revolution was also particularly active in the 1970s. It was not long before the 1960s idea that you could change society morphed into the belief that you must destroy it first. In the first half of the 1970s, just after their graduation from high school, George Wayne Smith and Christopher Harvin witnessed a constant parade of radical groups who not only believed they could overthrow a government, start a civil war, or collapse a society, but actively tried to do just that. Leaders of 1960s sit-ins and protests went underground, made bombs, blew up others and sometimes themselves. There were more than 2,500 bombings by radical groups in the United States over an 18-month period between 1971 and 1972 alone. Cops became pigs, regarded by the radical underground as foot soldiers of a deeply corrupt status quo and targeted for assassination in major cities from coast to coast. It did not matter that groups such as the Symbionese Liberation Army, Weather Underground, and Black Liberation Army had little support and stood no chance of succeeding. What mattered was that for the first time in the country's history, many, including George Smith and Christopher Harvin, were looking at American society and seeing a house of cards teetering on collapse. Smith and Harvin did not want to change the world. They just wanted to survive it once the whole shithouse went up in flames. If creative interpretation was required to match up events and cultural trends with end-times biblical prophecy, the means by which that prophecy would be fulfilled was utterly unambiguous. Vast arsenals of nuclear warheads locked and loaded on land, sea, and air assured that the apocalypse was not only possible, but in the view of millions, inevitable. Never was that threat more acute than in the 1970s. Dayton and the SALT I Treaty notwithstanding, what made the 1970s so dangerous was the dramatic increase in tactical, battlefield nuclear weapons deployed throughout Western Europe by both the United States and the Soviet Union. By 1980, the number of European-based tactical nukes reached well over 10,000, including missiles and artillery shells tipped with W-48, W-50, and W-70 thermonuclear warheads, with kiloton loads reaching well into double digits. As devastating as a single one of those tactical weapons would have been to the troops in the field, the greater danger they posed was their potential role as a gateway nuke to eventual strategic intercontinental nuclear warfare. After all, once you've morally justified using the first nuclear weapon, is it really going to be all that hard to justify defending your country with more and bigger ones? Both George Smith and Christopher Harvin were part of the first generation to live their entire lives under the threat of nuclear war. They had spent their early childhood overhearing adults chattering nervously about Sputnik, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the nuclear arms race. Their school days, from kindergarten through 12th grade, had been punctuated by monthly duck-and-cover drills. Both Smith and Harvin went straight from high school into the military. Smith was sent to Germany in the shadow of the Iron Curtain for 2 years as an artilleryman trained in the art of lofting battlefield nukes into enemy forces. Harvin, booted out of the Army after only 2 months, still gained an insider's understanding of the implications of the sharp ramping up of tactical nukes that was underway. The key takeaway for both was simple: we are all going to die. A less existential but equally contributing factor to the evolution of the two men from weed-smoking, petty scofflaws to violent bank robbers was rooted as much in the where as it was in the when. When George Smith stepped off the transport plane from Germany, he returned home to Orange County, California, to find himself at ground zero of the biggest religious youth movement since the Children's Crusade. There's no doubt that the Jesus movement had a positive impact on some young lives, especially considering the other countercultural alternatives available in the early 1970s. However, this brand of aggressive theology, intended to frighten the youth of Orange County into the pews and keep them there, was viewed by many as irresponsible, abusive, and dangerous. Born-again ministries such as the Melodyland Christian Center and Calvary Chapel, from which the movement originated, employed Pentecostal-style fire and brimstone tactics to keep membership in a perpetual state of terror, afraid that when the rapture came, Jesus would find them unworthy and leave them behind. Most dedicated themselves unwaveringly to the game.